What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is the Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1, Chapter 9, The Marshal. So yeah, this was a really good one, and definitely one of my personal favorite reasons why is, ironically enough, I've been really looking forward to getting into Justified Primeval City, since I just recently binge-watched Justified for technically my second watch through, but it had been a long time since I'd seen it. So I binge watched it again because I wanted to see the new series and I wanted to remember what made the original so good. So yeah, getting to see basically Raylan Givens in space was a lot of fun. I was so excited whenever he pulled off the helmet and I'm like, it's Timothy Oliphant, and then he just started talking, and I'm just like, this is Raylan Givens. He was even the Marshal. Like, it was perfect. I swear they were writing this episode and somebody was just like, you guys realize that we have a Marshal in space, right? You know who we haven't had in Star Wars yet? Timothy Oliphant. Let's get him in here. So yeah, it was brilliant getting to see him in action. It gets me really excited as well for Justified Primeval City, which will actually, I believe that's going to be the next series or the next season that I do after this one, because I'm planning to do 2 seasons of Star Wars and then take a break and do something else. So I think I'm going to do Justified Primeval City next. So yeah, this was the perfect episode to just get me hyped and get me excited to see that series and see what they do with it, and just see Timothy Oliphant be a badass Marshal, because that's what he's really good at. It's the role he was born to play. But yeah, so really fun to see him in action. But yeah, a lot of this episode was really interesting. You know, to see a little bit more of Tatooine that we hadn't seen before. And it's actually something that I didn't mention from the first season that I really did appreciate, is how little this series banks on, hey, you guys remember this? Like, we've seen so many shows. I mean, honestly, the Clone Wars and Rebels, while they were both good shows on their own, I felt like even they dipped into the whole, hey guys, you remember this? You remember this? That one episode where Lando shows up on Rebels, I'm like, well, you didn't need to do this. Or when Leia shows up, you don't need that. You don't need to have the holding hand of like, guys, you remember the original or you remember the prequels? Just tell your own stories. And that's what this show's done so well so far. Like, they've not had anything that's been like callbacks, or, I mean, a couple references here and there, but they haven't had to like, oh, we're going to Tatooine, I wonder who we're gonna see there. Nobody. We've seen the Tusken Raiders. I guess that kind of can count as a callback, but in reality, we've seen more of Tatooine in this show than I feel like we've seen in any of the other Star Wars movies. And that in and of itself is really impressive to me, because it shows that, yes, we are still going to make references to places. You know, he lands in Mos Eisley, but we're not going to rely on the originals or on the prequels. We're not going to rely on those movies and, you know, tossing out a bunch of names, having a bunch of cameos to get you to watch. We're just going to tell our own stories. And it's really, really cool. And even the deeper lore of the Tusken Raiders, you know, seeing somebody who can communicate with them and seeing, well, yes, they are raiders, and kind of their difficult environment has led to them basically kind of being a little on the barbarian side. They still are people, essentially. You know, they will still negotiate, they'll still deal, they'll trade. Yes, they are aggressive, but that doesn't mean that they are less, you know, they're total monsters, you know. So I really appreciated a lot of that in this one. We did see him talking to some Tusken Raiders in the first season as well. But this one really got into that scenario of, we see people who see them as just savages that can't be bartered with. But we have to trust them to essentially take on this creature that is much more powerful than anything that we could take on our own. And so in those moments, that's whenever, yeah, of course you have to make that sort of alliance, even though you don't really want to. And I feel like it's really cool to see that happen in this episode. And also just, I mean, the creature itself was massive looking, and honestly, it's the CGI in the show has been pretty good so far. Seeing that was like, wow, you could tell they had a bit of a budget for the second season, because they went all in on making that thing look grandiose, and just every single shot with it, you felt the size of it. So I really thought this was a great opener to season 2. As far as the main story, not much as far as moving forward in this. Obviously, we know he's looking for other Mandalorians so he can try to find a way to get Grogu back to his people. But we don't really we don't make any progress in this episode in that sense. So So the guy that shows up at the very end, though, the bald guy, there's a part of me that thinks, because I've seen some pictures, obviously, as much as I've avoided spoilers for most of these Star Wars shows, it's not like I don't see pictures of what's going on. I think that's Boba Fett. And again, anybody who gets upset by me calling Boba Fett, I don't care. To me, it's much funnier to call him Boba than it is his real name, Boba. Because again, it's Boba Tea. But I think that's him. I'm not entirely sure, but I've seen a couple pictures of what he looks like in the Book of Boba Fett. So maybe I think that might be him. In which case, that might actually be his armor. What's his name? Cobb? I think Cobb was the name of the Timothy Oliphant's kid. I really do just want to call him, Space Raylan. But I know that's not his actual name. But pretty sure his name was Cobb. But that's the armor that he had, maybe, is Boba Fett's. Maybe? Possibly? I don't know. In which case, maybe that's going to be kind of the first part of this season, is dealing with that. And maybe he's going to fight Mando to get it back. I probably should also call Mando by his name, which is Din. Since technically Mando is just short for... it's slang for what people call Mandalorians, but I'm kind of lazy in that sense. So once I'm stuck on something, I can't stop. Last final story on that for this part of the review, because I remember growing up, I always thought it was ramen noodles, because to me, it's spelled ramen. You think about how stamen of a flower is spelt. It's spelt the same way as stamen, so why wouldn't it be ramen? And so I called it that for a while until somebody corrected me, because obviously in Japan it's called ramen. But I was so stuck on it. And then on top of that, it was funny to see people's reaction whenever I called it ramen. And that's kind of why I call him Boba Fett, because the reaction that I get from people is kind of funny. And again, I think it sounds funnier than Boba Fett, but knowing that Boba Fett was his real name just kind of makes me think, why would you name him Boba? So, yeah, just kind of one of those funny things, though. That's kind of how my mind works. It gets stuck on saying something one way for so long that I can't stop saying it that one way. And then whenever I find out that it's wrong, but people's reactions are funny whenever I say it wrong, I kind of get stuck saying it that way even more, because now I'm doing it more so for the reaction. But anyways, little tidbit about me. There you go. You get to learn a little bit more about Mason today. But yeah, that's about it for this first episode. So on to the second one. I'll see you there. And now episode 2, chapter 10, The Passenger. So we went from an episode filled with stuff that I enjoyed a lot to my literal nightmare. Yeah, anytime you throw spiders in there, I'm just gonna be watching it going. This one was a little bit more of a filler, I felt. Now, granted, it is with purpose. He is trying to get more information about the Mandalorians, and this passenger that he has supposedly, I think, said her husband has information. I don't know. Some of it kind of got lost in all the different pieces. I was like, wait, so how does this all connect again? But he is doing this with a purpose. It still just felt like kind of a filler. We also do get maybe a little bit more world building as far as what the New Republic is doing since the Empire's fallen. And we did get a little hint of that at the end of last season, where the one guy was like, the Empire's fallen, and is it better? No, it's still crazy out there. So maybe the New Republic is not the be-all, what's it? Good all, end all good? I I don't know. The phrase is not coming to my mind right now because I'm a little tired. But essentially, there might be issues in the New Republic. They're not evil, but it might not be the great thing that everybody I think is hoping after the Empire falls. And it clearly seems that Mando, well, he's not friends with the Empire. He might not be friends with the New Republic either. So we kind of got to see a little bit of maybe the friction that he has with the New Republic, where he's done some good stuff in their eyes, but he's also done some bad stuff in their eyes. So he's kind of just sort of out there, an outlaw, to the point where the guys are willing to help save him from all the spiders, but they're also not willing to help him get off the planet either. That's on him. So it is interesting to see some of that, but at the same time, because there is a lot of interesting stuff going on, I do want to see him find more Mandalorians. I do want to see him get Grogu back to his people. That stuff is what I'm most interested in at the moment. So a lot of this other stuff kind of feels like filler at the moment. It's not bad. It's just that's kind of how I'm feeling about it. I'm like, let's get to the main plot, please. But yeah, overall, I mean, it was fine. It was pretty funny watching Grogu continue to just pop the little eggs into his mouth and just basically eat the... I think they said this was the last of their people. I think, if I'm not mistaken. They're at least not the probably endangered species, and Grogu's just like, whatever. This is tasty. So that was pretty fun. And that's honestly about it. You know, I will say just one of the things that I don't talk about a whole lot, but is something to talk about because it is very well done. The CGI is still really good. Granted, I still prefer when they use the practical effects because those still look really good. You know, the practical effects that we have has come a long way from what they had back in the original Star Wars movies. So to see them use some of the more modern day practical effects, it's really cool to see. However, the CGI, for even though it's just a TV show on Disney Plus, they clearly made sure they focused a lot of their time and effort into the CGI budget because, I mean, watching them fly around the clouds and stuff, the whole ship battle, I mean, it looked really, really good. So that's just something I wanted to give a little shout out to. This is where I'm going to find out later that, like, they overworked their CGI artists, you know, because Disney is known for doing that. So it's like, yeah, of course they were good because they forced them to work 12 and a half hour days with no extra time. And anyways, yeah, that's about it for this one. So on to the final of these three. I'll see you there. And now episode 3, chapter 11, The Heiress. So this one definitely made up a bit for the last episode because while the last episode was kind of a little bit filler, this sort of, I guess, grew out of that last episode, if that's the right term to use there. Essentially, this was the result. This is what happened after the aftermath of what was pretty much filler from the last one, and it was a really good episode. A lot of fun, introduced to some characters, brought in a character from the past. I mean, it was a really good time. Whenever Bo-Katan first showed up, I could not remember her name from the Clone Wars, but I definitely recognized just the suit, the design on the helmet. I recognized it instantly as the Mandalorian that we saw in the Clone Wars. And to find out that apparently Katie Sackhoff not only voiced her in the Clone Wars, but then even got to come back and play the part in the live action, that's really cool. And it's something that I really appreciate whenever they do that, because sometimes it's difficult whenever you're getting an actor that voiced a character in a cartoon or something along those lines, basically an animated character, and then they're coming back to also play the live action. It doesn't always work out because most of the time the voice actor doesn't look like the character they're portraying, obviously. So it's really cool the times that they can make that work and when they really try, because if I'm not mistaken, I mean, Katie Sackhoff, that's not quite her look, but they dressed her up, you know, probably gave her that hair, because unless they just cut it and dyed it and made it look very similar to the animated version. But yeah, I mean, she looked pretty similar. Like as soon as she took the helmet off, I'm like, yep, that's same person I remember. So yeah, very fun to see that. Also very interesting to learn a little bit more about the differences between Din and what he's doing and the rest of the Mandalorians. Because it was something, I didn't ask this question because, I don't know, in my head I'm like, well, this feels like they're just rewriting certain things about the Mandalorians. But of course there is that question of, okay, well, not every Mandalorian sticks to the you never remove your helmet in front of any living thing. So is that just something that we're ignoring now, or is this something else to it? And finally we get our answer in this episode about the cult, basically. I don't think they used the term cult. I think they use religious zealots. But that's essentially the people that picked up Din at the beginning of it all. They're a part of this religious group that essentially believe this is the way. Like, you don't take your helmet off because that is the old ways of Mandalore. So really interesting, and I'm glad we got kind of some answers on that as well, because it's a question that I didn't bring up, but it had been nagging at me at the back of my head. So it's cool that they even had an answer for that, like why we have seen some Mandalorians take their helmets off and why we didn't in this show. Yeah, overall, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward episode. It was enjoyable, seeing that Bo-Katan is trying to get the Darksaber back from Moff Gideon, and yeah, it makes sense. And I'm a little surprised that it kind of feels like that Moff Gideon is pushed off to the side for now, while we see Din taking Grogu to find Ahsoka. Which I did know that she showed up in this season because I remember hearing about it when it first aired. But that kind of seems to have become the main focus at the moment, which is a little weird considering Moff Gideon was brought up at the end of last season and now he's just been pushed to the side again. He is obviously still a bit of a focus because now we have this side story, but I don't think it's probably going to get much focus at all. Like, we're probably still going to be focusing on Din and Grogu, and that's about it. So it is kind of weird, and I hope that it's not something where we don't see any of Moff Gideon until the end of this season again, and then that's when it all ends. I'm kind of hoping that maybe they're just saving him until the end of this season, but even then, it's not like he's going to be stopped by then. It's going to be something that maybe builds into season 3. It's just, I'm not a fan of whenever they introduce somebody that's supposed to be kind of a main villain and then push him to the side, bring him back, and then take him out. It's something that the Blacklist did in one of the more recent seasons that I watched, and it just felt kind of wasted as the season goes because it feels like there wasn't a whole lot of build-up before, boom, we're done. So, yeah, all in all, 3 good episodes to start off the second season, and I'm definitely looking forward to see what else they have in store. So, that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe, future Mandalorian reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.